So if there's a topic that, you feel like is weaker for you, or you need more explanation on, that's what I would hope to talk about today. So either people in the room can say what, they'd like me to go over, or in the chat too, that'd be fine. So is there any like big topics that, any big topics that you guys want to go over, I guess, is 30s and 40s. Okay, so from 1900 to 1940. Okay, easy time period. Well, so if you're going from, let's do like decades. 1900 to 1910. We have two presidents during this time. I don't remember who it is.
What's his name? Teddy Roosevelt.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Oh, it sounds like the progressive era.
Well, I got asked what happened between 1900 and 1940.
Okay.
So we're starting off with the first decade.
Okay.
That's a lot of time.
And so U.S. imperialism.
There's a lot of stuff going on during this time. Yeah.
When you're going for the first decade, okay.
Yeah, first decade first. Okay, so we got Teddy Roosevelt. That's going to be great. Okay, Teddy Roosevelt. So we have the 3 C's, right? So we have consumer protection, corporations, or corporation control. So that's like trust busting. And we have conservation. Okay. So we have a lot of progressive policies. Mr. Keel, when he, like I mentioned, imperialism. The biggest, or some of the big imperialism things that Roosevelt's going to support is like the Panama Canal. And the Roosevelt Corollary. I think I spelled that right. Which was in addition to the Monroe Doctrine that said that we are going to use our military strength to control Latin in South America, to tell them what to do. So other countries shouldn't be doing that to them. Only we can. And I'm going to kind of skip over parts of this because we talked about it in our last review session about some of these progressive policies, like specific things like Meat Inspection Act and so on. So after Teddy Roosevelt, who's the next president? Taft. Is he more or less progressive than Roosevelt? Less progressive. He's not very interested in consumer protection, but he is interested in corporation control. He is a trust buster. Although Roosevelt was more specific, he wanted to get rid of businesses that were hurting the American public. Taft didn't really make distinguishment. He kind of went after businesses if they were big, whether they were good or not. His foreign policy that we attribute to him the most is dollar diplomacy. Where he convinces businesses to invest in Central American countries, South American countries, and even China. So basically, they're sending resources and supplies to those countries. And American can say, okay, China, okay, Nicaragua, you need to listen to us. Otherwise, we're going to pull those businesses out of your country. And so it's basically using money as a motivator to get those countries to do what we want. Any questions about that so far? Let's skip ahead to the election of 1912. Who we have TR versus excuse me, what is going on? Taft versus Wilson. Right, the Republican Party splits between Roosevelt and Taft. Yeah, there was Eugene Debs, but he was further down. So we have Roosevelt, who's the most progressive, then Wilson, who's kind of in the middle, and then Taft, who's more conservative. In the end, Wilson wins. Okay, let's try this again. So Wilson wins. His policy is going to be called the New Freedom. And he's going to go after high finance. So he's going to try to do like a new Federal Reserve System. Lower tariffs.
Wait, did you say Federal Reserve System?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, Federal Reserve System wants lower tariffs. And he wants to be a trust minister. But the issue that's going to really define Wilson is going to be World War II. Sorry, World War I. Wilson in the beginning does not want to go to war. He does not want to get involved with the rest of the world's war when it starts. I guess, yeah, you could say that. He, I think, the war starts and, Americans don't really have too much care about what's happening in Serbia, right? Or anything. They probably couldn't point it out in the map. So it's not very important. They're not our ally. And so when Europe goes to war, it's at this point kind of easy for us to say, yeah, we're not involved. Like, we don't need to fight. Besides, we're making money by selling to both sides of the war. As time goes on, we sell more to the British and less to the Germans, but still in 1916, he goes by the campaign slogan, "He kept us out of war." And this is after the sinking of the Lusitania. This is after, I think, the Sussex Pledge, where Germany says, okay, we're not going to blow up any more passenger ships. But the two big things that leads us to war are what? Two things, two causes. Surrender Notice 1, which is the proposal alliance between Great Britain, or I'm sorry, between Germany and Mexico. That's one. What's the other?
The other loose.
Lusitania is an example of the other cause.
Oh, the sinking.
Yeah, unrestricted submarine warfare.
I can't remember what it's called.
Yeah, Lusitania is an example of it. I argue always when this unit comes up that Lusitania is not a cause of the U.S. going to war, because that happens in 1915, 14. Can't remember what it is. I think it's 15. We don't go to war for 2 years until 2 years later. So it's really what's going to lead us to war is the continual blowing up of American merchant ships. So the war happens, all that stuff, and Wilson is then going to be one of the peacemakers with the Treaty of Paris, one of the many.
I look at comments and I'm just like, oh my.
One of the many. The Treaty of Paris. And so he's got his 14 points, okay, 14 ideas of how to avoid war in the future. The rest of Europe don't want those 14 points because it's stuff like get rid of our imperial holdings, and they're like, no. But the one thing they do agree to do is the League of Nations. But for Americans, the League of Nations has some parts that they don't like, including Article 10. But you'll read it as Article X. Article 10 that says that if another country goes to war, we have to join the war on their side. Or if we want to go to war, we have to ask all these other countries to vote on it too. So a lot of Americans feel like our war-making powers have been taken away because of Article 10. And so when the Treaty of Paris, or I'm sorry, not Treaty of Paris, Treaty of Versailles. So when the Treaty of Versailles comes back to the United States, there's a lot of debate over it between Henry Cabot Lodge and Wilson. It eventually leads to Wilson having a stroke. And then the Senate changes it, and Wilson tells his people to vote against it, and Lodge tells his people to vote against it, but some people still voted for it anyway. It's weird. It does not pass. So America does not join the League of Nations, and it's pretty weak. It's not going to really do much to help stop the war.
You did World War I.
1914, 1919, 1917. Yeah, if you've seen the movie 1917 from World War I, that it actually takes place on the day that America joins the war. Okay, questions about this? Should we do 1920s as well? Would that be helpful, or?
The Treaty of Versailles, wasn't that the one treaty that split up Germany a bunch and there were a bunch of new countries after that, and then Germany kind of.
They did split up countries, and Germany did lose some territory. The country of Poland comes out of this. But usually when we've talked about Germany being split up, usually that's after World War II. Yeah.
I just remembered that we did a bunch of assignments about that in world history this year.
Yep, Germany loses territory. They have to pay back a whole bunch of debt. They have to sign the war guilt clause saying it was their fault the war started. So Germany's going to come out of World War I feeling disrespected and feeling like they want revenge. Yeah. not the consumer side.
I think I'm-
1920s politics. Okay. So the war or the decade really starts off with the whole debate over the treaty, but we'll skip that. So we have our President Harding. And Harding is a president that you don't really hear about very much. And a big reason is because Harding wants what's called, or what he called, a return to normalcy. And that's true on a couple fronts. One, the war is over, so let's return to normal at like post-war period, but also return to normal as in like economic policies. For the last 20 years, America has been going through dramatic progressive economic changes. And Harding's kind of saying, okay, let's pump the brakes, let's relax, let's go back to the way things used to be. And so he wants laissez-faire economics. Okay, hands off. The government has had their hands off the businesses. They're not making rules, regulations, let them kind of do what they want. Now, another reason why we don't talk to Harding about Bert Harding very much is he dies in office. Some like stomach thing, it was like a thrombosis or whatever. I don't even know what thrombosis is, but it turns out after he dies, words released that there was a huge scandal in his administration called the Teapot Dome scandal. Which always sounds super weird, like there was a scandal at a tea party, what? So Teapot Dome is a protected natural area out in Wyoming, I think it is. It was protected by the national government, right? You know, it's like a national forest or something. And it turns out that members of Harding's administration had actually, I think it was, they leased out some of the land to businesses and industry, and they started like drilling the land for oil. So basically destroying a lot of environmental practices and safety and conservation there. And that those people were taking like bribes and handouts on the side. And so this all comes out after Harding dies. I think historians today kind of say that, you know, Harding probably didn't know about it, but it's hard to tell for sure. So Harding is gone, and that leads to Calvin Coolidge. And if you take the idea of return to normalcy or laissez-faire economics from Harding, turn that up to 11 on Coolidge, he is all business. He said, America's business is business. Okay, he wants businesses to grow as much as they can with as little regulation as possible. He wants laissez-faire economics. He's going to push for lower taxes of the rich, especially. And so America goes through a time period of economic growth. And so, you know, businesses are growing, stock market's increasing, you know, and there's probably a lot to say that, you know, this probably has a lot to do with it. But in a time period where there's almost no regulations, there's no safeguards to prevent any future economic disasters. And so that's when we have Hoover come in, who also agreed in all business, lower taxes. And we could get more into the Great Depression if we wanted to, but
Hoover was the first president during the Great Depression.
yeah, so Great Depression happened while Hoover was there. Yeah, so the main causes of the Great Depression are industrial problems. And what that means is factories, manufacturing, you know, they were making stuff. They were going through problems, like their prices are staying the same. They're not growing or anything, which in an economy where everything's going up, if something isn't going up, that's a concern. So our manufacturing is suffering problems. Distribution of wealth. The rich are getting richer, the poor are staying poor. You know, when our economy is growing, it's not good to see that large sections of your population are not improving. Their wages are staying the same. That's not a good thing during a time period of economic growth. Agricultural problems. So in the 1910s, during World War I, farmers are growing a whole bunch of food. Basically, they were like, you know, you can't grow enough food. Keep growing more and more and more and more food. So they're growing a whole bunch of food during World War I to feed not only the public, but also the soldiers and also people from other countries. But then after World War I's over, we don't need as much food anymore. And so all these farmers are growing too much food and don't have anyone to sell it to. Or during the 1910s, during World War I, they would like buy more land and borrow money to do it. And then in the 1920s, you know, with prices of food dropping or not being able to sell it all, they couldn't afford to pay back the money for that new land they bought. So a lot of farms started shutting down. And last one is some government policies. So lower taxes on the rich. Before this time period, the rich had a marginal tax rate of like 75%. And it was dropped down like 25%. Same thing happened with businesses, much lower tax rates. No regulation on businesses, no regulation in the stock market. And so when you have the stock market crash, that's not necessarily a cause of the Great Depression, but it's a spark. Kind of like when we were talking about World War I, you might remember the main causes of World War I. Do you remember those? We talk about world history, maybe? No. Yeah, well, so there was like military was a long-term cause, alliances, imperialism, nationalism, all those are long-term causes building up the tension. And then the killing of Archduke, that was the spark that let off the fire. That's kind of what the stock market crash was. Like if there was no stock market crash, it's not that the Great Depression wouldn't have happened, just would have been a little bit later, probably would have been a different stock market crash. Okay, it is 7:50, everyone. So there will be another review session. I think Mr. Keel has one this afternoon, but there's also one tomorrow morning, and I will be holding one tomorrow afternoon too. So that's all I got for you today, everyone. Have a great day. Make good choices. Thank you.